invite to the front our lovely Veronica from Southern African Resource Watch. She's going to be presenting on gender and climate change. It's always a challenge to present after an academic.
I think this was the last session was very interesting. I thought, I just wish we could go on and on. And I do hope that as we are going to the lunch zone, I don't get you into your element of trying to communicate with your ancestors whilst closing your eyes. But anyway, just to reintroduce myself, my name is Veronica Zano. I'm with the Southern Africa Resource Watch. We are a Pan-African regional organization that works in the 12 SADC member countries. We promote the transparent and the sustainable use of our natural resources. You talk about your oil, gas, mining, forestry, wildlife. And our goal is to tackle injustice, poverty, and for us, climate change is one of our programs that we have as an institution, configured along the lines of climate change and extractives. So for us, it's quite a very opportune moment for us as we are trying to develop and further this program, and for us it's actually something that we would like to commend the advocates for Earth and FES for inviting us to be part of this very important platform. For us, we are a learning organization, so for us, me being here is for an opportunity for us to also to learn the different work that different institutions are doing to promote the issue of climate change from the different lenses. And so the presentation today I'm going to be making is on gender and climate change. The way that I'd configured this presentation is more towards the ambit of the just transition. I've worked with Lenin for a number of years, and I know he's got a flair towards you know, the labor movement. So I was very strategic in terms of my presentation, so that I would not somehow try to integrate his key interests, so that next time I'll be invited, so that this won't be the first and last time I'll come to such important platforms. So I'm not really going to be talking about the key concepts of gender. No, that's not what I'm going to be doing. But I want to locate the concept of gender, especially gender equality and equity within the confines of the just transition and climate change. So to start, I think we do know that the world right now as it is grappling with a lot of issues, socio-economic and health impacts. And unfortunately, there's a growing deficit between the rich and the what? A gap between the rich and the poor. If you look at the news right now, I don't know how much. There are four, the richest, people on earth. I think there are about four. They constitute, I don't know, a number of billions that contribute towards the economies of the world. And for us, that shows us the disparities within the gaps of the rich and the poor. They are continuing to widen. And about 20% of the developing country population still live on less than $1.25 per day. And the growing concern, I think, is about that, the world is endowed with a lot of resources, and particularly for us as Africa, we are a very well endowed continent with a lot of natural resources, which have had a much anticipated expectations from its citizens that they are going to transform the socio-economic well-being of its citizens. When we talk about economic growth, we are just not talking about issues of gross domestic products. We're talking about how has the economy is translated to the change into the lives of ordinary people. And for us, I think the COVID-19 crisis or pandemic is actually an opportunity for us to rethink and look at how our economies have really been used to promote socio-economic development, especially the issues of our ability to respond to emergencies and disasters, such as the ones that we've been understanding about the impacts of climate change, such as the cyclone Idai, and now we have COVID, yet we are suffering from, we have poor social services that are able for us to be resilient to some of these shocks that we are currently experiencing as a result of climate change. And it is estimated that, for example, when we talk about, I think it was Hopewell and Tanya and I think Lenin in their introductions, they talked about the concept of the just transition. That is more towards more efforts to a zero or low carbon economy, issues of ensuring that we promote renewable energy, and generally a decarbonized energy system. And for us, the narrative that we are faced with is there is an issue of the challenges that will come with this just transition from a lens of a gender perspective, that is the men and the women, especially within the labor force and the labor market. We're also looking at the issue of the opportunities that will also come from this whole just transition to cleaner forms of energy and greener economies. And a key pillar in the energy transition is to ensure that equal opportunities are provided, which are accessible and provide benefits to all. Particularly, in a nutshell, we're saying there should be equitable distribution of the benefits that are going to come towards this low carbon economy that we are talking about. Next slide, please. So when we talk about gender and climate, there are a lot of international, legal, regional, international frameworks that have been conceptualized with the concept of gender or locating gender in climate change. And we do acknowledge, I think from our previous presenter, we've been getting insights in some of the impacts that come with climate change. Those, I think my my fellow previous presenters really provided a greater detail in terms of understanding these impacts. But what we need to understand is that climate change affects everyone, but it affects us in different ways. That is, as men, as women, as children, as the disabled, people living with disabilities, and generally marginalized groups of people. And unfortunately, the most affected people by the impacts of climate change are those who are already poor, marginalized, or vulnerable in some way. And the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change notes that people who are socially, economically, and culturally, politically, and institutionally marginalized are especially vulnerable to climate change and also to some adaptation and mitigation responses. And when we look at some of these disproportionately or marginalized groups of people who are going to be fundamentally affected by the discourse of climate change and its impacts are women. And for us, I think most people, when we talk about gender and you really talk about women in detail, I think most people will get this, gender is not about women. But I think as you talk about the concept of gender equality and gender equity, you understand why the discourse is more towards women because of the way that they've disproportionately been or disproportionately affected by the current status quo in terms of equal opportunities and their space in terms of gaining traction, in terms of being able to derive social and economic livelihoods in general from the world. So, and as such, you'll find that there have been different arrangements that have been moved towards promoting gender equality at these different international levels. For example, the Paris Agreement at COP21 stated that parties should take action to address climate change, respect, promote, and consider their respective obligations, particularly on gender equality and the empowerment of women. And similarly, we have the SDGs, where we have actually one of the SDGs being of gender equality and empowering women and girls. That's SDG number 5, which states that inequality holds back women and deprives them of access to basic rights and opportunities. And whilst progress has been made in terms of inequality, addressing issues of gender equality, it is a fact that women still face exclusion and discrimination in terms of socio-economic benefits in the world globally and even at international level. And with the climate change discourse, I think what we are seeing is that if we are not very careful, we are going to see a widening of some of those gaps. And thus, the issue of gender equality is integral to the climate change action, whereby we are trying to achieve an equity or equitable discourse in promoting and finding ways of mitigation and adapting towards the whole just transition to energy. So important for those, I told you I'm not a gender guru. So all I'll just give you are just snippets of when we talk about gender and climate change, we are particularly interested about the issues of equality and equality, equity and equality. And when we talk about equality, we are just basically saying, we are talking about providing men and women with equal rights and opportunities to access local and social economic opportunities to realize their capabilities and contributing to their social, cultural, and political development. So that is exactly what we're talking about in Engage. How are we locating the issues of promoting equal opportunities for men and women in the discourse of justice, transition, and climate change? And when talking about gender equity, we are saying gender equity is the process of being fair to women and men. To ensure equity measures must often be taken to compensate or reduce disparity for historical social advantages that prevent women and men from otherwise operating on equitable basis. I think there are socially construed norms that have hindered certain groups of people from actually attaining or getting to reach out to other opportunities, socioeconomic opportunities, whilst the world was normal. And with the climate change discourse, it's actually going to be even more if we're not able to address some of these gaps that have been there. And I'm going to, in my presentation, I'm also going to talk about some of the disparities that are there currently in terms of when you look at the labor force or the labor